flight from Dubai to London had taken off perfectly, the sky clear and calm. The passengers relaxed as the aircraft climbed to 30,000 feet. Flight 907 was known for smooth journeys, and today seemed no different until the moment everything changed without warning. Mira Khan, an 11-year-old girl traveling alone to meet her mother in London, sat quietly by the window sketching clouds in her notebook. She didn't expect her peaceful journey to turn into something the whole world would later talk about. It began with a strange vibration, a low hum that Mira felt through the armrest before anyone else seemed to notice it. The plane wobbled slightly, enough to make a few passengers look up. Then a sharp metallic beep echoed from somewhere near the front, followed by another. Mira paused, remembering that sound from the flight simulator she used with her father. Something wasn't right. A sudden silence spread through the cabin. The captain's voice usually came every 30 minutes with cheerful updates, but now the speakers remained dead. The plane leveled abruptly, as if someone had taken control or lost it. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle, whispering anxiously to another crew member. The second attendant's face drained of color as she glanced at the cockpit door. Passengers were beginning to panic. A baby started crying. A man pressed the service button repeatedly, and a woman clutched her husband's arm. The cabin lights flickered once, then steadied. Mira tightened her grip on her seat. Her father always told her, "Airplanes talk to you. You just have to listen." And right now, this plane was screaming for help. The flight attendants gathered near the cockpit, knocking urgently. "Captain? First officer?" No answer. They tried again, louder, desperate. Still nothing. One attendant grabbed the emergency phone, speaking rapidly to the cabin crew manager. The look she received confirmed the worst. The pilots were unresponsive, and the cockpit door was locked from the inside. The autopilot wasn't correcting the slow descent. The wings held an odd tilt, and Mira recognized the subtle shift in the plane's pitch. She had seen her father respond to this exact scenario dozens of times, but he wasn't here. Only she understood what these signs meant. As fear spread like wildfire through the cabin, Mira felt something else settle inside her. Not panic, but a calm clarity. She didn't know how, but she sensed the moment was coming when she would have to step forward, and she knew the plane, and everyone on it, didn't have much time. The cabin was filled with rising panic. Voices overlapping, babies crying, and passengers arguing with the crew. No one knew what was happening, and the uncertainty made everything worse. Mira sat frozen for a moment, her heart pounding, her mind racing through every memory of sitting beside her father in his flight simulator at home. She remembered how he would smile and say, "You're my co-pilot, Mira. Never forget, knowledge is confidence." Those words echoed in her head now, louder than the chaos around her. A flight attendant, clearly terrified, stood in the aisle and tried to calm everyone. "Please remain seated. We're handling the situation," she said, but her trembling hands betrayed the truth. The plane dipped slightly again, and a collective gasp rose from the passengers. Mira couldn't stay quiet any longer. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, her legs shaking but steady enough to take a step forward. I think I can help," she said softly. The nearest flight attendant blinked at her. "Sweetheart, please sit down. It's not safe to be walking right now." Mira shook her head. "My father is a pilot. I've flown in his simulator many times. I know what those sounds mean. Something is wrong with the autopilot. You need to check the controls." The attendant hesitated. Normally she would dismiss such a claim instantly. An 11-year-old couldn't possibly help, but there was something different about Mira's voice. It wasn't childish bravado. It was calm, focused, and the plane was clearly behaving abnormally. "Come with me," the attendant finally whispered. They moved toward the front of the aircraft. Several passengers watched, confused and hopeful at the same time. When they reached the cockpit door, the attendants tried again to make contact with the pilots, banging, shouting their names, even using the emergency override panel. Still, no response. Through the small security window they could see the captain slumped sideways and the co-pilot still strapped in his seat. "They're unconscious," the attendant breathed, fear tightening her voice. "Open it," Mira said without hesitation. "We can't. There are protocols." Mira stepped closer to the door. "If you don't open it, the plane will start descending faster. I saw the altitude drop. You have to trust me." Desperation finally forced action. Using a series of codes and the emergency access system, the attendants unlocked the door halfway and pushed it open. The cockpit lay silent and eerie, the controls blinking warnings across every screen, and Mira took a step toward the captain's seat. Mira climbed into the captain's seat, her small hands trembling slightly as they hovered over the controls. The cockpit felt enormous, full of buttons, levers and blinking screens, but her mind was sharp, focused on what she had learned from her father. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of his words. "The plane listens to calm hands. The aircraft was descending too quickly, and the autopilot was failing. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the dark clouds through the cockpit windows. The roar of the storm pressed against the fuselage, making the plane shudder. She reached for the throttle and adjusted it carefully, keeping the nose of the plane steady. The instruments flickered, warning of turbulence, but she ignored the panic rising in her chest. Instead, she focused on the airspeed, the altitude, and the attitude indicator. She knew she had to act fast. Every second counted. She switched to the radio, her voice clear but steady. "Tower, this is Flight 907. Pilots are unresponsive. I am a passenger. Please advise." Static filled the radio at first, then a faint voice replied, guiding her step by step. Mira repeated the instructions carefully, adjusting the plane's heading, raising the landing gear, and stabilizing the wings. The passengers behind her could see the flashes of lightning reflecting on the cockpit glass, and felt the turbulence tossing them in their seats. Fear gripped the cabin, but Mira remained calm, guiding the plane as best as she could. She remembered every emergency drill her father had run with her at home, every simulated landing and sudden drop they had practiced together. It was as if all those hours were coming to life now, demanding precision and courage. The storm intensified. Rain lashed the windows, wind pushed the plane sideways, and alarms screamed across the cockpit. Mira adjusted the flaps, calculated the descent, and kept her eyes on the runway indicators. She realized the plane would not stabilize itself. She had to do it manually. Sweat ran down her face, but her mind stayed clear. She whispered a silent promise to every passenger, "I will get you home." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but finally the clouds began to thin, revealing a distant runway. Mira exhaled, steadying the plane, and following the tower's instructions precisely. Her fingers gripped the controls with determination as the storm began to relent. She knew the landing would be tricky, but she also knew she had prepared for this, at least in her mind. Many times, the runway appeared through the thinning clouds like a ribbon of hope. Mira's small hands gripped the yoke tightly as she followed every instruction from the air traffic controllers who were guiding her with a mix of disbelief and urgency. The landing gear lowered with a loud thud, and warning lights blinked insistently, but Mira ignored the alarms, focusing only on keeping the plane steady. The passengers behind her held their breath, some praying, others silently sobbing, knowing that an 11-year-old was controlling their fate. The plane hit a patch of crosswind just before touchdown, jolting violently to the side. Mira remembered her father's advice, "Counter the force, don't fight it." She adjusted the rudder, gently nudging the nose back toward the runway center. The fuselage skidded slightly along the wet tarmac, and sparks flew from the landing gear. Panic surged behind her, but Mira's calm hands guided the plane inch by inch. The wheels finally made solid contact, and she carefully applied the brakes, feeling the enormous weight of the aircraft slow to a complete stop. A hush filled the cabin before it erupted into relieved cheers and applause. Emergency crews rushed onto the runway, lights flashing, but Mira remained seated, her heart pounding, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She glanced at the pilots still unconscious, and then at the passengers, many of whom were hugging each other, tears streaming down their faces. They stared at her in awe, a tiny girl who had done what no one thought possible. Ground officers entered the cockpit and froze, staring at Mira in disbelief. She simply smiled faintly, exhausted but composed, as if what she had done was only natural. Paramedics attended to the pilots, who were soon stabilized and awake, unaware of how close they had come to disaster. Passengers slowly exited the aircraft, many calling their loved ones, sharing stories of courage, and thanking Mira over and over. News crews began to arrive, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward the young heroine. Later reporters would call her the girl who flew Flight 907, a name that would spread around the world. But Mira didn't think about fame. She thought about her father, about the lessons he had taught her, and about the calm focus that had saved everyone on board. As the sun rose over the runway, casting golden light across the exhausted but safe faces of passengers and crew, Mira finally allowed herself to relax. She stepped out of the cockpit, small and unassuming, but inside, she felt a quiet pride. At 11 years old, she had faced fear, chaos, and a storm at 30,000 feet, and emerged a hero. That day, the world saw courage in its purest form, and Mira's